What do you think of when you envision pick number 195 in any given NFL draft? A former college walk-on? Maybe a gifted athlete? One who excelled at a non-Power 5 school and could maybe find a role in the NFL? How about 7 Pro Bowls and 5 All-Pro selection? Probably not. On many levels, Antonio Brown is an anomaly. Since being selected in the 6th round way back in 2010, no player has notched more receptions or yards than the man known as AB. After a slow rookie year in which he was only targeted 19 times, Brown began to establish himself as a standout wide receiver at the NFL level, hauling in at least 66 receptions in each of the next 2 seasons, all while appearing to be a consummate teammate and true professional. In 2013, Brown truly established himself as the transcendent talent we know him to be, and thus began his reign of terror on NFL defenses. Over the next 5 seasons, he would lead the league in receptions and yards twice, and quickly became a fan favorite in Pittsburgh. While he was known to be a little eccentric and received a number of fines and flags for excessive celebrations, there was hardly any inklings coming out of Pittsburgh that AB was about anything besides winning football games. In many ways, Antonio Brown is one of the best selections in NFL draft history. The amount of value he brought to the Pittsburgh Steelers as a 6th-round pick is only rivaled by what Tom Brady has done in New England. However, in 2016, as the fines continued to pile up, the perception of Brown in the media began to change, particularly after incidents in Week 1 and 4 when Brown was fined nearly $40,000 for dances that the league deemed sexually suggestive. The beloved 6th-round draft pick began to bear the label that has been assumed by many star wideouts before him, and surely many that will come after, a diva. Unfortunately for fans in the Steel City, perception often becomes reality for one reason or another, and the headlines started to spill out of both the local and national media. In October of 2017, former Steelers safety Ryan Clark went on ESPN radio and blasted Brown, saying, "Antonio has done an extremely good job of tricking people. He's done a very good spin job of having us think, or making people think who don't know him, that it's all about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brown is, in brackets, just a hard worker who's here to win football games. No, Antonio Brown loves Antonio Brown. If you listen to people talk about him, if you listen to the media, a lot of the time the fans, they have an adoration for him. That is not necessarily a depiction of who he is. He's like most receivers. He's selfish." A heavy indictment made by one Steelers great regarding another. Brown claimed that Clark was just bitter that his time was over in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers faithful still appeared to have Brown's back. Following the incident, Brown tweeted, "Apologize for all the noise and the distraction, Steelers Nation. Let's stay focused. #push47. And his mentions were flooded with predominantly positive responses. The 2016 season came and went like clockwork. Brown was dominant yet again, receiving his 3rd consecutive All-Pro selection. Brown was superb in the wild card and divisional rounds of the playoffs, hauling in 11 receptions and 2 touchdowns for 230 yards across 2 games. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. After the game against Kansas City in the divisional round, Brown broadcast the team's locker room celebration on Facebook Live, a move that is in direct violation of NFL rules and came on the heels of a request from team leaders Ben Roethlisberger and Raymond Foster to keep a low profile on social media. Even worse, the broadcast included head coach Mike Tomlin speaking crudely about their AFC Championship opponent, the New England Patriots. I mean, if there's one team that you just don't want to give bulletin board material to, it's the New England Patriots. It would come out later that Brown had been paid $244,000 by Facebook before the season to create content for live channels, furthering the self-centered narrative that was beginning to swirl around him. The Steelers organization was apparently frustrated but appeared ready to let bygones be bygones. They inked Brown to a 4-year extension, one that would make him the highest-paid wide receiver in the NFL. Once again, Pittsburgh appeared to be excited to have its homegrown star in town for a few more years. However, the whispers that perhaps the team was better off without the perennial All-Pro were louder than ever before. The 2017-18 season was largely without incident. Brown was once again selected as an All-Pro, and after suffering a torn left calf in Week 15, he gutted out a 132-yard, 2-touchdown performance in a divisional round loss to the Jaguars. Heading to the 2018-2019 season, expectations were high for Brown and the Steelers, but tensions between Brown and the organization as well as some of his teammates had never been more strained. Reportedly in training camp, he was sent home after a dispute with head coach Mike Tomlin, an incident that Pittsburgh covered up by saying he had a sustained knee injury. Social media continued to play a huge role in AB's transformation from a gritty 6th-rounder to a disgruntled diva. He would often post pictures of himself on Instagram with bikini-clad models, sports cars, and a number of other affluent excesses, which unsurprisingly rubbed many fans and media personalities the wrong way. Following a Week 2 loss to Kansas City, a video circulated on Twitter of Brown ripping into Randy Fichtner, the Steelers' offensive coordinator, prompting a largely anonymous Steelers PR staff to tweet, "AB needs to thank his lucky stars because he was drafted by a team that had Ben, and Ben got AB paid. You know darn well he wouldn't have put up those numbers for other teams." A tweet that Brown bluntly replied to, stating, "Trade me, let's find out." This sent the sports world into a tizzy. Was Brown just lashing out? Did he really want to leave the organization that he had seen so much success with? What the hell is going on in Pittsburgh? The organization that has set the standard for professionalism in the NFL now found itself in a Twitter-spurred controversy with the same guy that they had prided themselves on finding in the 6th round nearly a decade earlier. Both Brown and his agent Drew Rosenhaus, unsurprisingly the same agent who represented the infamous Terrell Owens, denied that Brown wanted to be traded, but at this point the receiver's discontent was evident. Shortly after, Brown was cited for reckless driving as he was caught driving over 100 miles per hour in his Porsche 911 GT3. And as the headlines about Brown continued to pile up, the relationship between Brown and the Steelers continued to sour. In December, Brown missed a game against Cincinnati that Pittsburgh needed to win to give themselves a chance at making the playoffs. It was once again announced that he had a knee injury, but it would later come out that he got into a heated dispute with longtime Steeler Ben Roethlisberger. The drama in Pittsburgh apparently started during a walkthrough practice, when AB got into a heated dispute with Roethlisberger, and the incident got so ugly that Brown picked up a football and threw it at Big Ben in a fit of rage. If that doesn't sound like a diva wide receiver, I don't know what does. One of the craziest tidbits to come out of the story was that despite missing that week of practices and feuding with management, coaches, and teammates, Brown still showed up at Heinz Field expecting to play on Sunday, only to storm off once he found out he was inactive. The Steelers would end up winning the game, but still missed out on the playoffs due to Baltimore's victory over the Browns on the same day. It marked the first time that the team didn't qualify for the postseason since 2013. At this point, the diva narrative fully came into bloom. Every avenue of sports media sunk their teeth into this story, and you can hardly take a stroll down the block without hearing an update on AB. Antonio Brown deleted an Instagram. Antonio Brown is now calling himself Mr. Big Chest. Antonio Brown dyed his mustache blonde. Antonio Brown just sang My Prerogative while wearing a hippo mask on a celebrity game show. What? That is just how crazy it has gotten with AB. Bobby Brown covers and hippo masks. It is like a diva wide receiver Mad Libs. Finally, the brass in Pittsburgh had enough and they began shopping Brown. At one point, it appeared that they had brokered a deal that would send Brown up to Buffalo, who was in desperate need of offensive playmakers. But Brown made it clear that he had little interest in even showing up if he was traded to Buffalo. Yeah, we have a diva on our hands. On March 9th, an official trade was actually announced. The Steelers sent Brown to John Gruden's Oakland Raiders and only received a 3rd and 5th round 2019 draft pick in exchange, which is an absolutely pitiful return for a player of Brown's caliber. It is painfully obvious that Brown's childish behavior tanked his trade value, and every team that the Steelers considered shipping Brown and his beefy contract to now saw Brown and his diva attitude as a massive liability. In the time since, Brown has done little to change that narrative. He went on Bleacher Report's The Shop and took zero accountability for what had happened in Pittsburgh, leaving many to wonder what happened to that hard-working guy, that team-first guy that the Steelers drafted number 195. NFL legend Bruce Arians, who was the Steelers' offensive coordinator when they drafted Brown, even acknowledged Brown's transformation, saying, "There's too much miscommunication, too much diva." So what did happen to AB? If you ask me, this was always him. The money and the success just exacerbated it. Despite being a phenomenal high school football player and track star, Brown was denied application to Florida State over academic concerns, forcing him to attend North Carolina Tech Prep instead. He parlayed this experience into a scholarship to play at Florida International University, but he didn't even play a game there as he was expelled before the season for an altercation with security. Eventually, Brown ended up at Central Michigan, where he'd ultimately played 3 successful seasons, but it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine there either. The coaches noted that Brown struggled showing up on time for meetings and practice and relied heavily on wide receivers coach Zach Azzani to keep him in line. Not to mention, these are just the stories that we've actually heard about. A fair amount of dirt gets successfully swept under the rug for athletes of Brown's caliber. So maybe once the 30 for 30 on AB comes out, we'll get some even more salacious stories. All I know is that this TMZ wet dream iteration of Antonio Brown is far less entertaining than the All-Pro who tore it up Sunday after Sunday. Unfortunately, him ending up in Oakland is one of the worst-case scenarios for her rehabilitation. The Raiders, frankly, are not a well-run franchise, and they are going to be featured on the fishbowl that is HBO's Hard Knocks. Not to mention that having John Gruden as their head coach only puts them even more under the microscope. Let's face it, the prognosis for an Antonio Brown comeback is about as bleak as it ever has been, and it will be a small miracle if we even see him make it through another season without at least a couple of negative headlines. Thanks for the memories, AB. Enjoyed going down in NFL history as just another one of the countless number of diva wide receivers. And if you're not subscribed to TPS, feel free to do that right now. If you have any ideas for cool videos, let us know in the comments section. We'll see you guys next time.